Well, hello, everybody. This is Rabbi Dan Levin, and this is Essential Questions. In the late part of the 19th century and into the early part of the 20th, waves of Jews made their way to new settlements in the land of Israel. They were called chalutzim, pioneers. As the phrase goes, they returned to the land of Israel, livnot ulehibanot, to build the land and be built by it. The growth of Reform and Progressive Judaism in Israel is remarkable, and also has demanded the dedication and devotion of modern-day chalutzim, visionaries and pioneers who have sought to build in Israel what Reform Judaism has always endeavored to be, a pathway to a modern and meaningful expression of Judaism and Jewish life that rose from within, that weaves together the threads of Jewish tradition with the sensibilities and life of the modern world in which we live. The tapestry of Reform Judaism that so many Reform chalutzim have created is truly a work of art, and it was woven in a very difficult environment, with demeaning demagoguery from the chief rabbinate and the Orthodox establishment, and from a culture that used to teach, the Judaism I do not practice had better well be Orthodox. Jews in Israel build their spirituality differently. There is so much to Israeli Judaism that comes from living in the land of Israel, building a contemporary life in a land that echoes with ancient resonances. Nowhere do we see the flowering of that vision than in the city of Modi'in. The story of Hanukkah centers in ancient Modi'in, where Matityahu and his 5 sons refused to bend to the will of King Antiochus IV and built the army of the Maccabees to repel the Greek invaders. Today, Modi'in is a planned city of nearly 100,000 citizens, equidistant from Jerusalem and Tel Aviv. The city is home to a wide variety of Israelis, and it was there that Rabbi Kehillat Shiryon, herself a true chalutza, a pioneer, created Kehillat YOZMA, which has grown to be one of the largest and most dynamic Reform communities in Israel. And today, that community is led by our guests. Rabbi Nir Barkin serves as senior rabbi at Kehillat YOZMA. Rabbi Barkin served in the intelligence services of the IDF before beginning a career in Israel's high-tech sector. After serving as a shaliach, an emissary to Wisconsin, Rabbi Barkin studied for the rabbinate and has served in various roles for the Israel Movement for Progressive Judaism. Rabbi Barkin is a widely respected community leader, musician, and novelist. Rabbi David Azoulay grew up in an Orthodox Sephardic community and made his way to Reform Judaism as an adult. He was recently ordained from the Hebrew Union College and has for several years served as the assistant rabbi at YOZMA, working in its day school and other programs. After October 7th, YOZMA leaped into action to support Kibbutz Nir Oz, one of the border kibbutzim near Gaza that suffered extraordinary loss. Nearly 1/4 of the members of the kibbutz were either killed or kidnapped, and YOZMA has done extraordinary work supporting that community, as well as the broader community in Modi'in, who have given so much to defend and protect the state of Israel and who have endured so much in the months since October the 7th. Rabbi Nir Barkin, Rabbi David Azoulay, welcome to Essential Questions.
Thank you so much.
So it's always excited to have you on this side of the ocean, though I love to visit you when I'm in YOZMA and in Modi'in, in your home. And I think so much of what we experience during this time is captured by Yehuda Halevi 1,000 years ago when he says, Libi b'mizrach v'ani b'sof ha'ma'arav. My heart is in the east, but we are in South Florida at the edge of the west. So what I'd like to talk with you about today is sort of where are the people of Israel in this moment? And when we think about this moment and we think about the people of Israel, we know this is a complicated moment, and we know that the people of Israel themselves are complicated. And part of what I also want to explore is a sense of how does Reform Judaism impact the lives of the people in your community, in the state? What is it that we are able to do as Reform Jews in Israel that can't be done really by anyone else. So maybe first, tell us about Kehillat YOZMA. Tell us about this very special congregation that you lead. What is it that they do in Modi'in? What are all of the different facets of congregational life? Maybe Nir, you can start.
Well, thank you for the answer, for the question. Congregation YOZMA was established close to 30 years ago in the new city of Modi'in, which was then established by the late Prime Minister Rabin that was assassinated in 1995. The city was established to accommodate people from Jerusalem and Tel Aviv who were, on one hand, tired of orthodoxy in Jerusalem and the too much free life in Tel Aviv, and they were looking for a suburb to raise their children. And Rabbi Kinneret Shirion, the founding rabbi of our congregation, saw the potential here. And today, almost 30 years later, from the 24 families that established YOZMA, we are a 1,000-family congregation that gives services in 3 areas: educational, social and community, rituals, synagogue life, and social justice. So between those 3 areas, or a little more than 3 areas, we are actually providing the answers or the meaning for people in different stages of life. We give it for children when they come to the school. We have 550 children in the day school. We're giving it to the youth that comes to the youth movement. We're giving it to the adults, to the seniors who come to the seniors programs, etc., etc. So we're trying to cover all avenues of life, of the secular, Masorti population of the city of Modi'in, and luckily we've been successful in that. We are the only Reform congregation in the city, and we're kind of competing with 3 small conservative synagogues and about 35 Orthodox minyanim in the city.
So I always think it's so interesting to think about how the two of you came to be partners in leading this congregation. Nir, I know you grew up on kibbutz and made your way after a career in high tech to find your way to the Reform Rabbinate. And David, I know that you started in a Mizrahi family, in an Orthodox family, and found your way to the Reform movement. Tell me a little bit about sort of who are the Jews that join YOZMA? Do they come from traditional backgrounds? Do they come from secular backgrounds? Are they Ashkenazi? Are they Mizrahi? Are they Sephardi? Who are these people that say, for me, a Reform congregation is where I need to find my roots?
Before we start with an actual answer to your question, I think that what we ought to know, and this also answers your introduction before, the fact that there aren't easy answers anymore in the world today. It's not a black and white. And therefore, the complication and the uncertainty and the fear and the anxiety of many things that happen these days in Israel and around the world are reflecting the answer of who is joining Congregation YOZMA these days. These are not easy answers. It used to be, at the very beginning days of the Reform movement in Israel, it would be German Jews or Austrian Jews and American Jews. And later it became Israelis who were exposed to the Reform values in North America or elsewhere. And later on it became those that attend Hebrew Union College, the Jerusalem campus, and on and on. And these days, the majority of the people who join YOZMA and Reform congregations are varied. And David's story, Rabbi David Azoulay's story, is maybe a beautiful example of how we attract more and more people, how the complication becomes more and more when we talk about the Israeli population that joins Kehillat YOZMA, and David can speak for who he thinks we bring in now.
Yeah. So maybe I'll start with my own story shortly. As you said, Rabbi Dan, I came from an Orthodox family, also my wife. But when our 3 daughters born, we knew that we have to look for the best education for them. And the best education for them, it's not just academic things. It's also the spirit of the school. And I had so much lucky that I found a YOZMA elementary school, and I started to work as a teacher, because I knew after a few weeks that this is the place that I want my daughter educated in that school. And there is a code that many Israelis that came from Orthodox families and became, I can say, became secular. So they said, we want that our children will be datlash. Datlash, it means dati לשעבר. I want my children raised as like they been before Orthodox, but now they are not Orthodox. And many children in our school came from that families, that one of the parents was an Orthodox before, or really a Masorti, came from a Masorti family, and they don't want them to go to an Orthodox education or a very Masortic education. They want them to feel that there is many ways to be Jewish, not just one. So our families in the elementary school and in the kindergarten is very diversity. They came from Masorti families, from a few of them from Orthodox family, many of them secular family. But the main thing is that the way of life as a Jewish liberal, this is the main thing, I think.
I think for me, when I think about how I was raised as a Reform Jew, and then I spent a period of my life much more observant. And what I came to realize is the reason I loved Reform Judaism was because of where Reform Judaism taught the most authentic commanding voice was to be found. So traditionally in Jewish life, you do what you're supposed to do because the Torah commands it. And if you're not sure what the Torah commands, you ask your rabbi, and your rabbi tells you what the Torah commands, and you do what they say. And the external impulse to do what is commanded doesn't necessarily matter whether it moves you inside or doesn't move you inside. You do what you're supposed to do, and that's that. To me, the reason why I loved Reform Judaism is that Reform Judaism taught that the commanding voice you're supposed to listen to is not the one that comes from outside of you as much as the voice that comes from inside of you. That voice that tells you, I have to do that because my soul requires it, because the way I hear God speak to me is from the inside, that demands that I live according to certain values and certain principles, and the structure of the halakha, the structure of Jewish life and Jewish law, guides me to live in harmony with what that voice inside me, the way I hear God speak to me from the deepest part of me, the most authentic part of me, says. And it's interesting because I think in Israel, people are starting to learn how to listen to that inner voice. And you see ways in which that inner voice comes out in that swing of the pendulum towards secularism. And now I think as it swings back towards tradition, but it's in a way that is more authentic to what that inner voice says. I can only imagine what the inner voice of an Israeli in this moment must be like, in the way in which we have so many cares and concerns that just dominate our consciousness. What kind of a state do we want to live in? Because living in Israel is more mission-driven, I suspect, than maybe in any other country, at least for our people. And how do I keep myself physically safe? How do I keep myself physically safe in all of the different ways that that manifests itself? And how do I draw on my tradition in this Jewish country to fill me in all of the ways so I can maximize what my life experience is? So maybe if we can just sort of boil that down a little bit. In all of the turmoil prior to October 7th, there was this whole year of agony over the potential changes to the way Israel's judiciary system was run and the laws surrounding that, and there was so much turmoil. How did Reform Judaism see its place in helping Israelis navigate that period?
The whole situation in Israel and in many other countries around the world now feel like trying times. It's not just Israel. You see it here in America, you see it in Europe, in various countries, you see it elsewhere. And the trying times for me, translating it with the Jewish values and the Jewish interpretations that we grew up with, or actually learned about, the thought that I can bring from Rabban Yochanan ben Zakkai, or others in the Mishnah and the Talmudic period that have just lost Jerusalem in the year 70 CE because of the destruction. So their whole previous life were turned around, upside down. And now you look around and you try to find out ways to continue who your inner self is in a whole different world. That's what I feel. Because you talked about the judicial revolution, but I can go back to the beginning of the pandemic, which began this world turmoil and the need to give new meanings that a community or a synagogue or a congregation should supply to its congregation, to its people. Of course, it was deepened during the judicial revolution, and what can I say, during the war in Gaza. It has become an essential and almost dramatic need. And therefore, as the clergy of the congregation, Rabbi David, Rabbi Smadar, and I, have to, in many ways, recreate the thought of what Judaism is all about, like the rabbis in the year 70, because the reality has been destructed. In many ways, the parliamentary system, the judicial system, and the government, the balances and checks that used to be then, are no longer what we knew. And in the midst of that, we as community leaders need to find ways to lead our community with moral values into the future. And in many ways, the past results or the past answers or the ways we knew from before are no longer relevant. And we must find new ways. And a community, family and community, are two of the top most important things for people nowadays.
I think that's so true. I think, whenever there's turmoil, you circle the wagons to some degree. You try to find the people with whom you can feel that sense of authentic security and a place to be able to put your anxiety or to process your questions or to find support. And that's exactly what family is for. That's exactly what community is for. And I can only imagine that in the aftermath of the attacks of October 7th, that need has grown exponentially. So maybe tell us a little bit about that horrible day for you, and how did you balance your own needs as a Jew, as an Israeli, with the horrors of that experience, and how you personally responded, and how did the community then find its voice and its place? How did Yozma respond in those early days after the attack?
So, in the morning of October 7th, when we realized what happened, so Yozma congregation took 6 projects, I can say, or things that we thought that it's very important for us to do. And one of them was to be how can I say, to be the anchor for the bereaved families. And it's not just to go to visit on a Shiva. It's begin with the funerals, and we knew that we have a few families that we know before that if something would happen, they really want us to be there. I'm talking especially about the soldier families, because in Israel, in the IDF, if something happened, so the Orthodox rabbi in the IDF took the in charge of everything. But if the family wants that non-Orthodox rabbis will officiate the funeral, so this is their rights. But we know that we have to offer that for them, because in that moment when the horrible message came, many people don't think about the circumstances and what will happen. So we have to call them or to message them that we are here, and a few families need us.
And I know that you officiated at a few of those funerals. Tell us about what it was to be with those families in that moment. What did they need from their rabbi?
I can say one family that Rabbi Nir and me went together. It was the family of Sergeant Yam Glass, Zichra Livracha, because it took like almost a month for them to get the message, so they can look for someone who help them with the funeral, not just the IDF, and they connect us, and we came to their home just after they got the official message that Yam was killed in October 7. It was like in November 3, and we saw a family that covered with agony. And I think this is the first time that we actually saw someone covered with agony. It's something that I didn't see till then. And they told us that they want some Israeli singer to come to the funeral, and they tried to reach him, and they couldn't do it, and he said that maybe he cannot come. So the first thing that Rabbi Nir did, that it's trying to reach him, and in 5 minutes he reached him, and he said, okay. And all of a sudden, Yam's mother, it's like she get up from the sofa and start to talk with us about the funeral, and something happened. And I don't say it couldn't happen with the IDF, but the fact that other people than the IDF officer was there, it was the beginning. And then we start to talk about the differences between Orthodox funeral and non-Orthodox funeral, and from minute to minute we realize that we are in a right place for them, because the way that they say goodbye from Yam was the exactly way that they wanted to do it. And the feeling that you can be there for your people is something I take it with me.
Yeah, I can only imagine, these families that, as you say, are covered in grief, covered in anguish, and all of the pain from that kind of a traumatic loss, to have gone through a month of not knowing where their loved one was, and then to be informed, but to be able to have the spiritual resources that fit for them, that are the right way to honor their loved one, is an invaluable gift that you gave them. But David, you mentioned that there were 6 different things, and Nir, you've spoken about that too. So what were the things you felt Yozma needed to do for your community and for the state of Israel in the aftermath of October 7th?
Well, the morning started at 6:29 on October 7th, and the sirens went off all over the country. And as a long-time Israeli, we could realize that something different is happening, because sirens were going off in Israel for the last 75 years. But that morning was a very different kind of a morning. The intensity of the sirens, the rapidness of them, the amount of shells that were thrown at Israel that morning, and quite soon after that, seeing the white terrorist Toyotas in the cities in the Negev were something that we kind of immediately realized that this is a different type of an attack, and this is more of a war than anything else. This was, of course, Simchat Torah, And we were supposed to gather to celebrate finishing reading Torah on one hand and beginning reading the Torah on the other hand. And we had to make a quick decision whether to hold the service or postpone it. And I came up to the board and suggested that we postpone it. Some thought it's the right thing. Some thought I was hysterical. This was good. We then canceled the service. I went up to the roof of my house to record the message to the community and sent it out to them at like 10:15 in the morning of October 7th, saying that we're uncertain about what the conditions are, but it seemed like a serious situation, and therefore I can only promise them that whatever happens, we will be together as a community. And by soon afternoon, like early afternoon, the community manager at CP, the board, and I have come up with the 6 avenues that we would like to support the country in this terrible time. And one of them, as Rabbi David was saying, were the funerals of the soldiers that were killed during the first months of the war. But also we had to really make sure that we find the 242 active duty soldiers and reserve duty soldiers of the community, because many of them were called to the front without any advanced preparations. It was a surprise attack. And we wanted to find out that they have all the needed equipment. We also understood that the civilians, the kibbutzim and villages around Gaza were attacked in a very aggressive, terrible way. And we wanted to supply and give help to those in need. So we adopted Kibbutz Nir Oz right away. We needed to tighten the security of our own buildings because we were also on the green line between Judea, Samaria, and what is called Israel, of course. And we needed to make sure that an attack of that kind will not come from the territories. We also understood that the tension in the north is going to be high because the government and the army were expecting a parallel attack from the Hezbollah from Lebanon. So we adopted a factory, an essential food factory in Kiryat Shmona. All those activities were decided by the early afternoon of October 7th. And what I do want to say about it, to add to what I said before about Rabban Yochanan ben Zakkai building a new Judaism following the destruction, is the fact that a quick answer to rapidly changing realities is one of the things that we learned in our congregation that are very essential. Because throughout the following months after October 7th, there were many institutions and bodies that helped those in need. But we were the first one to get, for instance, to Eilat with caravans of new clothes and toiletry equipment to give to the Nir Oz evacuees, those that survived. Only 3/4 of the community survived. 1/4 of the community was killed and raped and were taken hostages to Gaza. And we were there on Monday morning. Less than 48 hours after the attack, Yozma was there for them. So the quick answer, the fast-changing realities is an important thing in times of trauma, in times of battle.
One of the things that I remember was when our community visited Yozma. It was just a month and a half or 2 months, not even, after the attack. Members of the delegation from our Jewish Federation came to Yozma, and we packed up boxes of materials for the refugees from Nir Oz who were establishing new apartments in Kiryat Gat, which had been arranged for them. And so we were packing up boxes with all of the essentials of things that you put in a new kitchen and a new house that you don't even think about, a power strip and a new mop and a tinfoil and all of those necessities. I was just struck with the brilliance of what was in that care package that you put together. But what I remember being so moved by was we weren't just providing the needs for their kitchens and for their new homes. We all sat together afterward and made Chanukiot. Because in addition to having lost their clothes and their furniture and their homes, we wanted to make sure that they were able somehow to find light in the darkest time that Israel had known in a generation or two. And the idea that there would be these very simple Chanukiot that we were painting that were expressions of love from your community and allowing us from North America to provide that sense of love to these people that we don't know, but to say, hey, we hope that you also can find light in the dark times. I was just struck by the fact that a synagogue would think not just of the material needs, but of the spiritual needs. What are the spiritual needs that you have seen from your community, from Nir Oz, whom you're helping, that you've been able to meet beyond the bereavement care that I know that you've given to so many families? I remember when we were there was an individual whose son, thank God, was injured and not killed. And I know that you were there for that family as he's recovered, but also I can only imagine the worry and the anguish of all of those households whose loved ones are serving on the front lines, and the worry and concern about, is my kid, is my husband, is my daughter going to be okay? Tell us a little bit about kind of like how the community responded to the spiritual needs of the congregation.
So the menorahs, the Chanukiot, is a very good example because Yozma congregation had a few circles, as Rabbi Nir said before, the kindergarten, the elementary school, the youth movement, the senior project, and the people that come just for prayer. So many circles. It's not every day the whole circles became one. And I think this is something spiritually is very important for a congregation. And the Chanukiot project was not just you did the Chanukiot. You did like 20. We did like 150, and you did it, and the youth movement did it, and the children from the elementary school with their parents did it, and the senior did it. Many circles did the same thing, and I think even not. And this is the how can I say that? The fact that everyone did one thing, I see it like a spiritual thing for a congregation. Like everyone get together for one purpose, for help some other people that no one knows, because we don't know Kehillat Nir Oz before that, and to do something all together for one purpose. This is, I see it like a spiritual thing, and we did it a few times after in a different occasion, and this is very helpful for the congregants that didn't know each other till then, because they just came to prayer and they just come to the youth movement. And I think now, like almost 2 years after October 7th, many people in Yozma congregation, they feel that they are really one congregation, not just came for one thing. It's very whole things, and this is important. And after that, to fly to Eilat with 150 Chanukiot in the first day of Hanukkah and gave them the Chanukiot, it was a very unusual experience.
What did the members of Nir Oz who received these Chanukiot, what was that experience like for them?
We have a beautiful story about that. But before telling the story about Rina and Alon from Nir Oz, who survived the massacre, I want to say that Congregation Yozma have done a similar project in the past with the Aspen, Colorado Reform Jewish community. There was a summer that the many houses of the people who go to the Reform congregations in Aspen were burned down in a brutal fire that happened just a few years ago. And as friends of that congregation, friends of that Kehillah, we sent them as many Shabbat candlesticks as the number of those who had to evacuate their homes or lose everything. I mean, we didn't think that we can send underwears or toiletry. What we did wanted them to know that we are one. And by sending Shabbat candlesticks to them, to each and every one of them, was our show of solidarity. So we did it a few years ago, and then we repeated that with the Chanukiot for the Nir Oz community. Alon and Nir and Rina are a very veteran members of Kibbutz Nir Oz. Rina actually is the secretary of the kibbutz. And by saying secretary of the kibbutz is not the one who sits on the typewriter and writes. The secretary of the kibbutz is the one who's one of the most important members in the kibbutz. And she was sitting in the front desk at the hotel that Rabbi David, the deputy principal of our school, and myself were coming. And as we were entering the hallway, by the way, we did coordinate the visit. She did to us, I don't know how you say it in by voice, but she gave us this sign of come over here before you go anywhere else. And she said, who are you and what are you bringing? And we said we brought 150 Chanukiot for the remaining members of the kibbutz. And she said, we don't need that. And we said, fine, but we still brought it. Where can we put it? He said, well, ask the hotel people where to put it. And since the people were really hosted in hotel rooms, they couldn't put fire up in the hotel rooms, and therefore we put all the Chanukiot, 150 of them, at the lobby of the hotel. And I went and tried to speak to Rina again and said, why don't you introduce the project to your people? And she said, well, I will when you leave. And she was kind of don't get too closer. And
so Israeli.
Yeah, it is, but we also have to remember that these people have just they just came out of the catastrophe. And I was very attentive to that fact. And beyond bringing Chanukiot, ever since that day till this very moment, that Rina and Alon are traveling in Portugal, we've become best friends. Because what these people have needed, except for the clothing and the toiletry, and even the spiritual ornaments, like the Chanukiot, was an ear to listen to them. And we've been that ear for them, for many of them, for that long. So the spiritual care and the love and the attention has become so close between Congregation Yozma and the Nir Oz community that even Rina, who's been so tough and, in her words, aggressive to me, has become one of my best friends this day. I go there every other week. They come to us for Shabbat dinners, she and her husband and the children and the grandchildren. So this is what we can do. It's very little comparing to the catastrophe that they've gone through, but this is...
But I think that human connection, that need to reach out and to help, has been borne by the entire Jewish community. When we had our solidarity trip last year, and we called and we said, what do you need? And you said backpacks. And the soldiers from the community needed new backpacks to be able to bring, and not just like a backpack that you'd pick up at Costco, like, a really good Osprey backpack. And we wanted to bring as many as we could. I think for Aileen Spilka, who's one of the assistants in the clergy office, she took it as her personal mission to scour the United States to find these backpacks. And she found 4 from this vendor and 6 from this vendor and 3 from this vendor, and was able to put together 30 backpacks that we were able to bring. And it meant so much to our congregation, to the people in our community, to be able to bring these backpacks to be able to then spend a little bit of time stuffing them with all of the materials and supplies that you had amassed, basics that a soldier might need, new socks, a T-shirt, warm clothes, Nutella, all of the things that and I think we got more out of it, I suspect, than the soldiers we gave it to, because of the need to be able to reach out and to connect and to give and to try to do whatever we could to bring some sense of healing. I'm wondering, what is it that when people come for Shabbat to Yozma, in all of these months since the war and since the attack, with anguish over the Chatufim, over the hostages that is ongoing. In our congregation, we have a prayer every single week for the state of Israel, for the hostages, for the families, for the soldiers. We have a chair in our bima with an Israeli flag because we want them to know that they have a seat waiting for them when they come home in our congregation. What is it that people are bringing to your sanctuary when they come for Shabbat? What are their needs? What do they need when they come to try to find some Sabbath, some rest or renewal from all of the challenges that everyone is facing?
I want to say one sentence, and then I want Rabbi David to give an answer to that. But during pandemic, which started in Israel in March of 2020, we couldn't hold services in person. So we immediately moved to the Zoom, and we started recording and live streaming the services. And despite the fact that the entire world was upside down, there were those people who could not resist not coming to services and sneaked into the so-called sanctuary, which was then a studio, to attend services in person. So this gives us an answer about what the needs of the community is when in times of destruction. But David can talk more about the real war that we are experiencing for that long.
In the beginning, the weeks after October 7th, our, I can say for myself, our prayers was very sad one. Very mellow, very low. We can't use the original melodies that became people very high, and spirituality as we are doing every Shabbat. And there was one fact that I remember it now, that we weren't able to change the parochet of the ark after
the curtain in front of the ark where the Torahs are held.
Yeah, that we have a special one for high holidays, and it took 2 months to replace it for the regular one. And we need some congregant that say to us, you have to replace it. We cannot stand it. It's very every time I came to the synagogue, I see the October 7 in front of my eyes. So you have to change it, and we did some works together to do it. And I called her to do it together before the next service, and we did it. And I think this at this point something changed, and we can slowly, week after week, go back for what people know before, without take out the prayer for the hostages and the prayer for Israel. We do it every Shabbat, but the balance became much more like a routine. And we can do now, almost 2 years after October 7, we can do a service that maybe 60% of the service is what we did before, and just 40% actual what happened now. And I think the congregants that came to the synagogue to prayer, they really appreciate that we can hold Lecha Dodi like the same, Lechu Neranena the same, and then dive into hostages prayer, and then got up again to Baruch Hu, and we found the balance, and I believe they really appreciate that.
There is another anecdote which is almost a funny one, because we needed to tighten the security around our buildings and add codes to the doors, etc. And it was the week or 10 days after October 7th, and we had to choose a code for the door. So I suggested 7-10-23, October 7th, 2023. And we did that. And then a few weeks later, or a few days later actually, the managers of our preschool classes said to me, I can't press it every morning when I come into work. It's just too hard for me. So we had to change it again to a random number. But those things that were evolving from October 7th, the service type, the style of how we dress, the changing of the parochet, the curtain that covers the ark, all those things are an evolutionary or evolving in the months following the war. And we have to be very attentive, differently attentive than to the needs of the congregants than what we knew before.
And the new code is 2044, and I hope till 2044 we have a peaceful in Israel.
There we go. I like that. So in our congregation, as it is in Reform congregations around the world, we are trying very hard to encourage people to vote in the World Zionist Congress elections. And what is it that the Reform movement does in Israel? What is it that you bring in Yozma and with the rest of the Reform movement to Israel that is indispensable? That if we don't vote in the World Zionist Congress elections and there isn't a strong voice for Reform Judaism in Israel, what are we going to lose? What is it that's so intrinsic to what we do that can't be done by anybody else?
I think first we have to explain that those old institutions that were established before the State of Israel was established are still a very crucial institution for the Jewish world to this day. So by stating this, we have to understand that the entire Jewish world is represented in those congresses or gatherings. The State of Israel is represented there by the ratio of the parties in our Knesset, in the parliament. Meaning, if currently the majority, not of the people, but of the Knesset, are members of the extreme Orthodox parties, the extreme nationalist parties, and the Likud, they get the majority in the Congress to vote for what Israel needs and how to select and decide for the millions of dollars that are being selected to different organizations in the country. So the Israelis are represented by the representation of the Knesset, of the parliament. The world Jewry, which is the majority of them are liberal, Reform Jews, is represented by voting. So I cannot emphasize it more than asking you to just go and vote. Take the 5 minutes and the $5 and vote for the Reform community, Reform party that goes to the Congress. Because your values, your identification, your stamp, your fingerprint is going to be about how Israel is going to look like, different than what we see now. So the importance of it, of the values that we share in the Reform movement, is crucial. And only if you vote, and only if we get the right representation, the values that we believe in will be implemented.
So when we think about what Yozma does and the way that you've provided pastoral support to families who have lost soldiers, and the ways that you provide continuing support to the families whose loved ones are still held hostage, and the way that you hold your community together in a spirituality that makes sense to someone who either comes from a religious background but doesn't want to live in that very constricting Orthodox world, or someone who came from a secular background is trying to find their Jewish spirituality. The work that the Reform movement does in Israel is absolutely essential. And that's why we're trying to get everybody to participate in the World Zionist Congress elections. As you said, it's 5 minutes and $5. And information on how you can participate is in the show notes here and can be found on Temple Bethel's website, tbeboca.org. David and Nir, it is always great to have you in our congregation. Kehillat YOZMA and Temple Bethel have a love and a partnership that we cherish, and together we pray we can go from strength to strength. The Essential Questions podcast has been made possible by the Temple Bethel Jewish Ideas Incubator, committed to creativity and innovation in modern Jewish life. Many thanks to our production team. You can find this podcast on Apple Music, Spotify, and the Podbean app, as well as on Temple Bethel's website, tbeboca.org/essential questions. Share this podcast with your friends. Rate us on Apple Podcast or Spotify to spread the word. And we want to know, what are your essential questions? Let us know by emailing us at eq@tbeboca.org. I'm Rabbi Dan Levin, and thanks for listening to the Essential Questions podcast.